Today we'll be focusing on, as Veronica said, how startups can embed governance and transparency and trust practices from the get-go, from starting basically their own company. We know that these are not just some buzzwords, they're the foundation of really sustainable and responsible business. Today's webinar, as you've seen, part of the Boost Up project, which is basically a space for young entrepreneurs in Scandinavia and in Ukraine to explore business and purpose. There you can find a lot of resources, inspiration, and community. So thank you very much also, Veronica, for organizing this for all of us and making these sessions possible. The agenda that we have for today, we'll have a 1 hour session. We have quite a lot of things to cover, but we will try to make the best of it. And of course, at the end, we'll have some Q&A, but we'll start with looking at what do we mean by when we say governance. It's definitely not politics specifically, so what do we mean by that? We'll talk about transparency and trust within the organizations, about inclusive leadership, so how we as leaders and business owners can make sure that our organizations are actually inclusive to our partners, to our staff, and so on. We're going to talk about some different tools of governance. We're going to talk about how do we communicate our values, so what our company stands for, both internally and externally to others. And at the end, we're going to have some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please let us know. You can also write down in the chat, and then we'll come back to you. Okay? So today, I'm very glad that we have with us Travis James Matters. Hi, Travis, again.
Hi.
Travis is the co-owner and CCO of Airflight. This is a drone startup located in North Jutland, in the north of Denmark, that builds very heavy lift flying cranes. Also, he is the former assistant professor in innovation and business at the UCN here in the north again. So he'll be sharing a lot of insights about startup life and business with us. So again, thank you very much. We'll start delving into our topic for today. So we'll directly start with a question like, what is governance for startup? Because when we talk about governance, I know that it could be a bit unclear. It's not just for big corporations. Basically, this is could be also for very small startups or even one-man company at the beginning and setting up your rules and regulations of how you operate, how you take decisions, how responsibilities are shared within your company, who is accountable for what, and so on. It's basically a system of rules and processes that guides your startup and how it is run. I'll show you now as well. It covers different things. So this could be who makes decisions in your organization and how those decisions are actually made, which is very important because you have to be quite clear on that. It looks at how your finances are managed in the company. It looks what happens if the founders disagree, because maybe if you don't have one, especially ruling partner, if you have a few, or management team, like what will happen if we're not at the same opinion at some point. It looks at other things like how to ensure this legal compliances, how to protect the company from risk, and so on. To do that in your own company, you have to start from the beginning, which basically will be, in your case, choosing the correct legal structure for you. So you know that we have, for example, APSs, or we have personal companies, AS, and so on. This will affect, of course, the reliability of your company, but also the taxes, how you raise money, and so on. So this is very important to know what type of company you have. And then based on that, you have a few documents which kind of show or incorporate your governance. So this is your founders agreement. This defines any roles and responsibilities, equity within the company. Then I'll also put them here for you. Then you have a few other ones that we're gonna, oh, sorry about that. There you go. So we have the founders agreement, then we have the article of association. This layouts basically all the rules that you have in the company. And these are very important because also shareholders, but also potential investors will look into those to see how you actually take decisions, who is responsible for what, who can sign different documents, and so on. So even in the very, very early stages of a startup, you have to have a clear structure that avoids confusion later on. Because the more complicated your company becomes and the more staff and other actors you have, it's harder actually to start making all of those setups. So from here, let's look a bit. I don't know why my slide is jumping. So from here, we're going to look into why actually, now that we know what is governance, like what do we mean by that, basically the structuring of the organization, like why does it matter actually for a startup or a new company? A lot of startups often operate quite lean and quite fast. And this is also sometimes a big advantage because they are not like these big corporations where you need to have approval of 15 people until something actually changes. It really impacts everything from the speed that you do things to fairness to how your team morale is, even to be honest, and how confident some potential investors to your startup will be because they can see that you're organized already quite well. It is quite often misunderstood, like when we talk about governance, especially for startups, to be honest, I see that quite a lot. A lot of, as I said, think that this is something just for the big corporations, but it's not because it's all about defining how those decisions are made, who will hold responsibility for which part of the process, and how do you share basically power in your corporation. So I'll start a bit back and ask first Travis if he can take us a bit from the beginning of his own company, just give us a few words and tell us how did you come up with the idea and how Airflight came to life, maybe. And so also our participants learn a bit more about your company.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Susie. My name is Travis. If you can hear on me, I'm American. I'm from Wisconsin, but I moved to Denmark in 2015. We started Airflight in 2019, and that's where I met my co-founder Mikkel, where he had a dream of building a flying car, actually, and that was the first thing that we made in Airflight was a flying car prototype, which was super cool. It was really wild, and about the time we were going to start trying to raise some money for that idea, we got in some Danish medias, and the wind industry saw what we were up to, and they said, you know what, we need an unmanned version of this heavy lift cargo drone to transport tools and spare parts offshore to offshore windmills. So then we built a large cargo drone that could lift 100 kilograms, and then they needed 200. So then we built the big one that was in the picture before that could lift 200 kilograms. And that's the main journey of Airflight. And we've had all kinds of crazy experiences. We ended up crashing that beautiful one that's in the picture that you saw, and now we're doing some other stuff again. So we've really gone through the full ups and downs of the entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, wow. That's incredible, and yeah, we saw how it looks, so it's pretty impressive, and I can wait maybe a bit later to tell us about crashing it. But hey, can you tell us how did governance or this like type of structural played role in the early decision making of the company? Like, did you have any of those documents? Like, did you start and we'll figure it out, or did you have like some sort of a agreement or understanding of how we're gonna take decision and who does what?
Yeah, it's a funny question because when you're first starting out, or a funny experience to go through as an entrepreneur when I was first starting out, because you kind of I went into it with a mindset of course we need to sort of establish some rules and some ways of doing things and how we want the company to be, how we want to conduct ourselves and everything like that. And at the end of the day, we tried to be like that, but in the very beginning, and it felt like being corporate from the beginning. Because the funny thing that happens in startups is that you're changing all the time. So you make one way of doing things, and then you find out that was actually a bad way. So then you change it to make it better, and then you start trying to document how the new way, and it just kind of slowed us down in the beginning. So we kind of started out trying to really make a lot of procedures and stuff like that and ended up kind of going a little more with the flow. We kind of parked that. And this is in the beginning when we were two and then three and then four people who were all sort of co-founders and sort of took it from there actually. But the bigger you get, the more processes you do need to put in place.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. But was there like a moment when you realized, okay, now having a clearer structure, let's say, will help us avoid, let's say, risk or take decisions better at this point.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. One thing we did from the beginning, which is of course very normal to do, but I've noticed that not all startups do it, is give everyone a title, even though it feels a little silly when you're three people in a garage that you're like, oh, I'm the CEO of the company, and it's kind of like
Yeah.
sure in the beginning. But it is at the end of the day, it's good to be like whoever the CEO is, they sort of have the last say, and you can run things are much more democratic in the beginning. So if we were four people and three of us wanted one thing and the CEO wanted another, we would often do the thing that three of us wanted. But as we grew to be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people, it become much faster to just the CEO gets the final say. And that's somebody that we all trust, that we all believe in, that we all know is going to hold up the values of the company at the end of the day and wants the best for the company. So just having kind of someone who's like the final decision maker, it really speeds up the process, and it also gives everyone else a feeling of that you're sort of taken care of in a way. So that's another way that we did it sort of in the beginning.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned the role setting in a startup, like when you're like three people, let's say, or even two, and like I'm now the CEO and then you're the staff, right? Or like everyone else. I even heard like I don't know like how others here that are joining us today live deal with this, but I even heard like I can share a good story from one of the startups I worked with a few years back that when the CEO, because they were a very, very small team, like under five people, and then he was actually technically the CEO and also one of the owners, but also when he went, for example, to reach out to clients, he was changing his title because he was like, it would be weird that the CEO is doing this or that, right? So it's like, now I'm the business development manager. Now I'm the sales rep. So he was trying to kind of navigate like his role based on the commitment that he currently has. And then like when it grew, of course, like he has the position. But I think that especially in the beginning, like the CEO does everything, right? Because you're such a small team, you have to step up.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody does everything. So like as a as a part of the like executive team of the three person team, everybody has a turn, so cleaning the bathroom and sweeping the floor and everything else like that. So yeah, 100%. And yeah, it is funny when to introduce yourself as like, oh, I'm the chief commercial officer of Airflight of my four-man company. So it is a funny process to go through, but then at the end of the day, it is the truth. So
It is, yeah,
uh,
exactly. Yeah, I think that that's how it is. And as you also mentioned, at a very valid point that especially in the beginning for startups, things change so much and so rapid that sometimes it's just hard to write down maybe all the procedures. So I think that when we talk about procedures in general, in the especially for the startups and the early, starting ones, especially, I think that we have to point out that it's better to have something simple and have it rather than try to make everything perfect because it will
yeah,
change. So by the time you draft it, it will probably change how you do stuff. So it's better to have like some outline of like, okay, this is what's happening. So we still have some idea of who does what and what the responsibilities are. So it's quite clear, but don't delve too much into, okay, we need 16 pages of just explanation of each role because by next week, probably it's going to be something else, right?
yeah, 100%, and that is exactly how it goes. Startups, they're just so dynamic and going left and going right so quickly in the day to day, and also you're just constantly finding better ways to do things. So that's yeah, that's it's quite important to be agile. And one thing we would do there is like you can make a lot of times when you think of governance, you think like you said, CC, about there's a 16 or 100 pages of regulations, and if this flowcharts of do this in this situation and that in another situation. But at the end of the day, you can just start out with a set of core values, and you can start out with a general job description of each of the founders and the first employees and things like that. So you have ways of guiding decisions that we
Mhm.
all agree on from the beginning, but it doesn't have to be so concrete and so corporate from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. I think that that's the main point to also one of the main points to kind of remember for tonight. Just don't overcomplicate it in the beginning. It's good to have it, but don't delve into like that big of a book just of outlining how you do stuff because it's probably gonna change next week as well. Great. We talked in just before we actually started the official conversation a bit about trust and transparency, and how governments governance can actually beat this, specifically for the startups. I'll take us a step back, maybe just to explain that. Um, what we mean by transparency, because it's not just like being open in general, but it's like a very strategic tool actually that builds this long-term credibility for your company. In the age of information and this value-based consumption, customers, investors, and even your team members, to be honest, they want to know how the decisions are made, who is taking them, where the money goes, what values drive your company, because they want to be sure that they are aligning with this, and especially for consumers or customers and investors. They want to back up companies that they believe in and that they're doing the ways that align with their own values. So we have to, as a startup, embrace kind of this transparency signal as also a signal of maturity, because this way we are inviting collaborators rather than opening suspicion when we're too close and not sharing what we do. I think for startups, this could only mean that just being clear about the pricing, also like how pricing works, also like who's on the team, who's the decision maker, as we talked about, how is the user data handled in your company, and so on. I think especially here in Denmark, transparency is not just appreciated; it's kind of almost expected at this point. Danish consumers are, and also the investors, to be honest, they place very high value in honesty, openness, and being fair. And they're more likely to trust and support companies that are open from the upfront and consistent in the communication that they have externally as well. So maybe Travis, can you tell us a bit of how in Airflight, like how does it work with you, because you're a tech startup and you have potentially a lot of also sensitive data, I guess, like from also how it works, but also from maybe potential customers as well. So how do you handle transparency with customers and partners as well?
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's really really important, and it's something that I didn't realize it would ahead of time before actually trying it in real life. But it's actually a very vulnerable process, because transparency does mean not just that you share all of the good things, but you're also sharing stuff that isn't perfect or doesn't go as well, or was a failed experiment or whatever, or a failed execution in some way, shape, or form. And that's quite a vulnerable thing that can actually be quite painful. And but I have found like the deeper that you embrace that, the more trust that you build. And of course, that makes the most logical sense that you can imagine, because in your professional life, a lot of times it can seem sometimes, at least in my experience, that employers maybe they expect some sort of perfection from you, or they expect, everything should always be right, or whatever. But like, what other place in your life is that an expectation? Like, absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you got to make sure things are safe and everything like that. So we want to know if there's a problem with the product from our end, from our internal guys, if they're struggling on a solution, or if they're not fully confident in their solution. Like, I mean, a big drone like that, it can fall out of the sky. So it's very important.
Yeah.
And from their end, they want to know, like, at what point do you tell people, okay, we have 6 months of cash left in the bank, we have 5 months, 4 months, 3 months, but we're about to close around, so it should be fine, but there's no guarantee of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite important to transparency really does build trust, is one thing that we've found
Yeah.
over and over again.
Yeah, I completely understand. And have you ever had to make a difficult choice between like keeping something internal, or just you have to communicate it openly, because as you said, like it's still like the good and the bad we also have to put out there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's something that I suppose this example, it's like something obvious now looking back, but in the time, you kind of, I remember my business partner and I, we were like, how do we handle this situation? And it was
Yeah.
the first time that we had a major crash with one of our earlier prototypes, and we had sort of a meeting with our investors and board of directors coming up, where we were giving at this point, it was like monthly updates and check-ins with them. And at that point, we were really nervous to do these updates, because, yeah, we wanted to impress these people and show them that we were capable of doing what we said we could do. And if we had an issue, that we could handle it ourselves and we don't have to go running to them. But we did have an incident, and we crashed the drone, and this time it didn't get destroyed, but it was like, let's say, a 6-week setback in our progress.
Oh,
And we're like, how directly do we say it, right? Because there's a difference to saying we had a minor incident which we're on top of, and we learned a lot from it, and saying like we crashed the drone and arm is totally broken off and we're 6 weeks behind, right? Those are two different messages
yep.
to send. And earlier on, at this point, we just decided to say, just give it straight. Like at the end of the day, like let's just be direct. Let's give it to them straight and hope they react well. And from that point, we really found the more honest that we are, the more they actually trust us. Because
Okay.
the investor group and the board of directors, if we're saying, look, this kind of big setback happened, this is exactly how it happened, this is our plan to catch up, but something bad happened here. The more honest we were about that, the more they were like, okay, they're kind of clearly telling us what's going on here. Because from a startup, stuff is going wrong all the time. There's problems like all of the time. And investors and board members, they're also smart people who have been there and done that, and they also know that stuff is going wrong all the time. So if they're only getting positive reports quarter after quarter, they kind of know there must be some stuff that you're not telling us.
Yeah, seems fishy, right? Because nothing is
Yeah.
perfect, you know. Yeah, exactly. I think that's really blends to my point. My next question will be like, how have you seen like this transparency kind of influence both the investors but also potential customers in the company?
I think what we've really found, especially like you said, working on a high tech product that we're still not fully into the full blown market state, like fully commercialized stage yet. So we're doing a lot of development. We're doing a lot of pilot projects with customers and co-testing and everything like that.
Hmm.
And the more transparency you have, it invites a lot more collaboration. So transparency, it builds trust and it invites collaboration. It allows more people with more perspectives to get eyes and solutions on the problem, which gets you a better solution in the end. And once you, I will say though, once you start going outside of your own company, you kind of have to think. You also have to be a little smart about the transparency, right? Because you can say one thing in 10 different ways and kind of have 10 different messages on the other side. And you want to, if you do have control on the problem, you of course want to communicate that you have control on it, but you are looking for inputs, and this is where we are at this stage right now.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very valid point because yes, you sometimes almost like feel vulnerable, like think, okay, this happened, we made a mistake, or like this is just like what happened, because it's just part of the process. Like nothing is perfect, especially in tech. Like you need to, I guess, try 50 different ways until you get the correct one. And it is almost expected, to be honest, at that point from I think investors especially, they understand that it's a journey. It's never like a straight line up. It's kind of like this. It's fluctuating like how things work. So I think it's also very important, to have those messages out, and then if they're supporting you, but also like basically you get a lot of feedback and maybe just fix whatever it was supposed to be fixed, or maybe there'll be more understanding also of just waiting a bit more, or even giving a bit more cash or whatever it is needed, so we can go basically to the next step as well.
Yeah, definitely. The more they're included in the process, the more willing they are to continue the journey together because they
Yeah.
feel more part of it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I think it's very important for everyone just to understand actually how crucial sometimes, especially in the beginning, this transparency is. Great. Um, the next thing we would like to touch upon is leadership and especially ethical decision making. So we talked about that governance is basically what shows how we make decision making. So how can we ensure that we as leaders or owners are also ethical within our company, not just like personally, but actually doing that within our company, because sometimes it's not the same thing. It's not about just vision, it's also about basically ethics. It's actively creating like a space basically for different voices, different people, different perspectives in your company, to make the startup smarter and basically more resilient, because the more different opinions you can have and different angles maybe people can have, it might lead to also better solutions. I think this ethical decision making in general isn't always easy, but it will really define your company's character, and it will shape it for the future for sure. There's values, these values in being ethical, basically, I think they're not optional they're also a competitive advantage, because this inclusive leadership will mean that you're ensuring that people from different backgrounds and experiences and perspectives, basically, they will feel seen, they will feel heard in your company, respected, and this doesn't just improve the morale basically of your company, but it will also make definitely better decision making, because they know that they're not afraid to speak out and just say what actually they mean. And you hire those people for their expertise. You don't hire them just to say yes, yes, and do whatever you think. You hire them because this one is good in, let's say, engineering, the other one knows about business, and so on. So you want to actually have people who are good at what they do and being able to tell you when, okay, something needs to be changed, because basically that's what you're paying them for. And I think for startups, it can be as simple as basically involving the whole team in the beginning, and what Travis was saying about taking certain decisions, or at least getting feedback from them quite regularly. Okay, like, is this also, are you aligned with this? Are you happy with the decision that we are taking as well? I think in Denmark, the company culture is often very quite flat hierarchy, and we have this consensus kind of driven decision. So basically, everyone has to be on the same page, and that's how the decision is taken, rather than the, let's say, more top-down leadership where just the CEO tells, okay, I think that's the right way, so that's how we do it because I said so. I think that this approach basically will promote more ownership of your employees, so they'll actually assume the tasks and kind of like feel also safe in the team, but also it will equalize if there's some ethical dilemmas in general, because they can just pick up, you can find the decision, and that's what it is. Um, Travis, can you maybe tell us what does inclusive leadership mean for you as a one of the co-founders as well? Like, how do you understand that?
Yeah, it's I really like the way that you put a lot of that too, where you put in systems and behave as a leadership group and as a leader that gives your employees the chance to actually feel ownership in what they're doing. Like that it's not just their task to do something, but it's like it's a part of them that they're actually building and getting the opportunity to be a part of building. And I think like that's what can also bring the most satisfaction in work as well. And we've tried to do this in a few different ways, and it's like I'm still learning how to do this and to become a better leader each year, each day. But I think it's important to spend time with your employees first of all. So we would do monthly one-on-ones. I would do a monthly one-on-one with each of our employees, and we were at our biggest. I had 15 employees, so it's not like I had a massive company. We were at a size where I could still do that. But there it's like a safe space where it's not about giving them feedback, but about getting their perspective on everything. Like, how do you think the company's being run? Can you be critical of me or some of the other guys running the company and things like that to get their feedback? And like you said, sometimes you just reach these junctions in
Mm.
startups where you have to either like make a big turn left or right. And it's nice to have an open meeting with everyone and say, listen, everyone, like this is where we're at. We got to make this decision. This is not necessarily a democracy, but we still want to hear from you and get your input so we can make the best decision for the company, for example.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I completely agree with that. And how did you ensure, let's say, that your leadership style specifically, or like the leadership style in the company, also aligns with your values?
That the leadership in the company aligns
Yeah,
with my personal values or
yeah.
with
Oh, also the company ones, because I guess those align as well.
yeah, it's all kind of the same in a startup, I suppose. But it's so important, and you know you see it everywhere, and I've now experienced it for myself as well. That it's just so important who you work with, who you choose to actually spend your time with, because like maybe other than your significant other, but actually probably not. If you're an entrepreneur or have a startup, you almost spend more time with your founding team and
Yeah.
with your coworkers than you even do at home sometimes. So it's so important that if you're going to start something with like if you're going to start a company, the people who you started with, you're like kind of married to them at least for a short amount of time. So you want to make that choice very carefully, and you want to have a diverse team, but you want to have very, very aligned values. And
Mhm.
those values are essentially going to become the initial values of the company. And from that point on, going straight into hiring too, like hire slow, fire fast type of a thing. And I don't mean firing people fast in any kind of a bad way, but if it's a bad fit for the team and it's dragging the whole team down, it's quite important that you give that person an opportunity to work somewhere where they'll also be happier as well. So incorporating aligned values into the hiring process is also super important. And of course, like values is very different than competencies and personality types and everything like that, because you really want to, you get a lot more benefit when you have very diverse personality types and very diverse team and diverse perspectives, so you can, yeah, get all those different perspectives in on the decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard recently that the best CEOs are the ones that can basically hire the best, you know. Like I think from my perspective, so one of the hardest things is just to put together a very good team. Because sometimes you have like very good individuals that are extremely good at what they do, but somehow it's just because of the personality aspect. I think also they cannot work together. So it's almost a craft, you know, to be able to put together a team which has the skills, but also can work together and have kind of the same vision and align with your vision as well. And yeah, so it's not an easy task, I would say for sure. And I think also from what I've learned, seeing a lot of different startups working with us, is that be very careful for your first two, three hires, because those first two, three people will set up your company culture basically. They will set up for everyone else that comes, because everyone else joins that team and says how, oh, this is how it is done here, right? So we have to be very careful, especially with the first few people and who we have on the team, and to ensure that really they kind of are aligned with our also values and what we would like to have in our own company.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so important to whatever values you set for the team and whatever standard that you expect from your team, you have to be really far above that yourself. And that's also like, I mean, it's very obvious to just state it like that, but that's something that I've learned personally because, for example, I'm not, for example, the most super ultra structured, organized person in everything that I do. When I do my job, I use a lot of systems to be as structured as possible and to help myself with that. But when you say, okay, the workshop always needs to be like this, it needs to be very clean. The where we eat must be picked up after every time. The garbage always out. But then if they come into my office and look at my desk and it's a mess, then nobody takes it seriously because they're like, well, obviously Travis doesn't care because look at his desk, right?
Yeah.
And that's a silly example about cleaning, but it makes it really it's important how you present yourself, the way that you communicate, the way that you interact with the team, and everything like that. You can't say it. It's really important that you're always respectful to your coworkers and then go yell at somebody in a disrespectful way. Like you have to be way above whatever standard that you expect from your team.
Yeah, exactly. Lead by, you know, example, and then also actually have even higher standard for yourself. Because I've been part also a lot of different companies, and I've seen CEOs that come at 10 and leave at 2, and then be like, yeah, but you have to work very hard. I'm like, you're not really like showing people that this is what this company stands for, you know, looking for, because they also don't feel like, oh, this person doesn't take their own company serious, like what are we doing here, you know. I think that sets that kind of the pace for it as well. So yeah, that's for sure like very important to show up basically and be basically somebody that people want to work with. I think that's
Yeah.
very very important as well, right? Great. We talked about a bit transparency. Another aspect of it, or specific aspect, basically, if I can say it like that, is actually the financial transparency, especially in accountability within the company. This helps align your internal team. And so, yeah, so whether it is sharing your budget breakdowns or your fair salary or the environmental impact even on your company, it's all about basically building credibility of your company. So it helps the startup attract some funding from outside or align the values basically with everyone else. So that also means that being open both internally and externally, sometimes it's also about like how money are spent and how money are earned in your startups and how they're distributed basically internally as well. So this closely ties to transparency with accountability as well, because which means basically that owning those outcomes of financial outcomes or financial decisions and being able to answer to your team or to your investors or to your community. And if some mistakes are made, which happens, I think, or some projections fall very short, you thought you're going to make quite a lot, or you'll be finished in 4 months and it actually takes 6 months, and so on. Accountability here will mean that, and together with transparency and accountability, it creates a more a culture of, let's say, trust and. Um, so, Travis, can you tell us like what level, if we can call it like that, of financial transparency did you practice in Aeroflight? Like, how did you manage to balance this openness of the finances, but also confidentiality as well? Because at that point, we also have like some things that we are not really able to share with others.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like that can be a tough line to walk actually, where it's like, of course, like when you sign a work contract or anything like that, then you have some kind of a confidentiality agreement in the work contract. So you should like theoretically be able to like 100% trust employees, but employees just like me and just like everyone on this call, we're all people who let things slip here and there, and people who are not at the top decision-making level of a company don't always have all the information to know exactly why something needs to be confidential and what piece of information can really cause harm or benefit a competitor or cause harm to your company or things like that. So just because the way we did it is we didn't give like 100% transparency to everything. There were, of course, folders that only myself and the other leaders had access to, for example. But on a much more general sense, we tried to be as transparent as possible so that people sort of knew that the financial well-being of the company was being taken care of, that we only had so much runway left in the company, but there was like fundraising going on to combat that and to get things under control. Like I think one of the most difficult things was when we did crash our drone in the middle of a funding round. We had sort of 3 months left of cash, and we were supposed to get cash on the account as soon as possible. And when that fell apart, we kind of had to decide: are we actually going to tell everybody that now there's only 3 months, and at the end of that, then there's not enough money to pay people? Because here in Denmark, you can get the unemployment benefits and stuff like that, so they wouldn't lose money. Or do we tell them now and risk that everybody runs off to a new job without staying to try to help us save the company, basically? And the thing that really helped us make a decision, and what I always try to go to is, am I trying to keep something secret because it's actually strategic, or am I just trying to have control that isn't really my business to try to control, if that makes sense? And for example, to try to keep things that are important for people to know and not tell them, that's really just me trying to control something that really should be shared. And so that then when I realize that, then I really try to share that.
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree and understand. I think that next thing we wanted to talk about is basically like how do we communicate those values? So those mission and vision, core values, and code of conduct, or our own culture, basically. So I think the mission statement alone by itself, it doesn't shape the company specifically, but it's how you hire, how you fire, what we talked about, how you collaborate and reward other people who do well. I think those tools like code of conduct or the cultural book handbook, if you have, make these expectations a bit more clear. And I think everyone is aligned with what you want to have as a message. I think that the startups can also communicate their values both internally and externally in quite different ways. Internally, it could be about aligning the team through consistent practices. So how do you take feedback? Like, as you said, like maybe have some one-on-one meetings with everyone. How also recognition is handled, because I think that's very important also in teams to recognize when somebody is doing outstanding work and so on. But also how disagreements are resolved in a company, because not always is the case that we actually agree. For example, if one of your values, let's say, is openness, how should you see that reflected in the team meetings or decision making or in your communication even, and so on? Or for example, like your code of conduct, that's the practical tool, as we most know, that basically outlines like how you expect others to behave, like your team, your collaborators, as well. And it's not only to protect the team, but it also sets kind of the tone for like the entire culture that you have in your company, basically. Travis, did Airflight have a specific set like code of conduct in that sense, or some similar maybe guiding document to say, okay, this is who we are, especially when you have a few more employees. This is who we are. That's how I believe we should be acting as well.
Yeah, so like I said before, it starts kind of with some core values, with like a mission and vision that you're all working towards, and then we essentially made like a shorter and then started adding to it employee handbook type of a document. It was employee handbook document, and that was like you said, more of guidelines about what it is to work in air flight, the way that we behave in different situations, what the expectation is for each employee, and everything like that. So once you can decide that for yourself, and you can make it work to whatever you want to do in your own company. But it's good to set it to make sure that expectations are clear, because essentially, if you don't have clear expectations, you have absolutely nothing. No, you have no standard to hold people to. And if you try to hold people to expectations you don't have, it feels very unfair to people. And I'm sure everyone have tried something similar where you didn't even know there was an expectation, and all of a sudden somebody's kind of mad at you.
Yeah.
And then once you have these expectations, as soon as you see something being broken, you have to say it right away. And this was a game changer for me, because in my early days, I didn't want to, you know, dampen the mood. I didn't want someone to all of a sudden have a bad day because they came in 1 minute late and I didn't say anything. And then I'm like, being too strict about that they came in 1 minute late, or that they didn't do the job to the right standard. But when you just get into a habit of, as soon as you see something, that you just say it to them, and it doesn't have to be on any kind of official write-up or anything like that. And in fact, I recommend that you don't, but just saying, hey, that's not the way we do things here. I keep using this example of what time we show up, but you showed up at 8:01, and in air flight we show up at 8 o'clock. And you just set that as an expectation, and of course you hold yourself higher than that standard. Then it becomes very easy to have these conversations because nobody's in doubt.
Yeah. I think it's also it's very valid point. I think it's also important to remember that the company's values should not be just like what's something you wrote down on the wall or like something on your website, but it's actually what gets rewarded, I think, as well. That's very important. And also what gets tolerated or not, and how you react to it in that sense, being late, or like maybe you have some other examples to give us of like when somebody was not, let's say, representing the company in the way that they were supposed to, for example.
Yeah, giving positive feedback, it's so important. Showing appreciation and gratitude when it's well deserved, it really goes a long way. And I'm sure everyone can remember a time when someone showed you appreciation and it really meant a lot to you. And I like to do that again. That just like if somebody's doing something not according to the values, when somebody's doing something very right, also tell them right away, like very quick, and like, hey, I saw that you did that. That was really great that you did that. Thank you. So to give them a quick one right away, and then I would keep a couple of notes of bigger things people were doing that I really appreciated for those one-on-one conversations that we had, to just really take a moment and just let them know. And we also each at the end of the day on Friday each week, we had our team meeting where everybody had the opportunity. Everyone had to say one win from the week, so we had to have one positive win to reflect on. And it
Yeah.
was also an open forum that they could be critical of something that had happened, or something that maybe isn't going as well. And it was just a safe, open space where they could also say that. And then as a last thing, keeping that win list to acknowledge people in front of the whole team when someone's done something really, really great. And when you're building that culture, like you said, Cece, it's not something that you can just write on a piece of paper, save it on the cloud, and then never talk about again. It's something you have to keep reiterating. And sometimes it's just not a tangible thing that people do. Like sometimes people, they just do something where you're like, that thing you just did, that's how I want everybody to be all the time in this company. That was really great. And sometimes it's as simple as just telling people that, like, the way you handled that, like, more of that. That was so great how you did that.
Yeah, exactly. Just have like this direct communication, just also kind of praising, like not only saying, because sometimes it's very easy to see and say like what not to do, but
Yeah.
sometimes we forget that we have to praise people and just explain and be like encouraging, because sometimes maybe they don't know exactly what is on our heads, or like in the company policy. So it's also good to show like what should be encouraged, and okay, like you did great. But I think it touched upon something else there about giving credit as well. I've seen that's extremely important. Just acknowledging, like, okay, like it is a team effort, but this person did very great on that, or like that person. I've seen like this I would say that it's almost as important as having like a good salary for somebody to feel like they're actually appreciated and their effort is actually seen.
Yeah, 100%. And it really fills people up, and it makes sense because, of course, we all like to be acknowledged when we've done something right. And it's really important to be specific about it as well. So it's one thing to say, "Hey, nice job. You did a really good job on that," or whatever, or say like, "Yeah, this person, they were like, did a really good job." Like that's fine, but that's so generic. But it's great when you can say, I even if it's something small, if I pull a stupid example out of my head, like, yeah, I really like the way that you saw somebody else drop some trash and you went and you picked it up and you put it in the trash can. I appreciate that because one of our company values is quality, and that's like the highest quality of taking care of the workshop that you can do. And exactly behavior like that is the type of employee that we're looking to work with for a long term. It's
Yeah.
very different than good job, right?
Yeah, I have also like this more like a personal belief, but I believe that like how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you're sloppy in your personal life, you'll probably be sloppy in your work life. If you kind of try to maybe not take all the responsibility, maybe not do everything on 100% that you can on one task, you're probably gonna behave like this on another task because you just learn types of behavior, like just how we conduct. So I think that's also why it's very important that when you see somebody do well, praise that and make sure that also others see that and know that this is the standard to keep. I'm very grateful to also have a super great team, and then we always almost like have like a standard of okay, like this is that person's name standard, so you have to be as good as this person because you know like what we mean, like this is how you lead, like this is how you organize a good team, and this is how you treat others as well. So we almost have it like a badge, like be like this person or be like this person because they're super proactive and so on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's one thing I found too is it's so important to make a safe environment for people to also say when they've made a mistake.
Yeah.
Like the backside of that, right? Like it's so like if you have a company where when people make a mistake that needs correction quickly and they just come and tell you so you can fix it, and that's just the culture, like you're gonna go so much farther as a company. And that, in my opinion, that all starts with being that accountable yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
at that Friday meeting, for example, or sometimes on a one-on-one, if I didn't handle a personal situation with an employee that well, I'll take accountability for that. Or if the management team, if we've made a mistake, then we bring it up to the team and say, hey guys, like as management, we've made a mistake. We did this. We see in hindsight it should have been like this, and that's on us, right?
Yeah.
And when you put yourself in public with your mistakes, it makes it feel safer for your employees to do the same,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you
I,
can win
I
as
I
a
believe
team.
that too. I think it goes back to just, setting the bar and just leading with example, right? Because if
Yeah,
you do it, they
exactly.
will feel like it's okay to say, because especially in startups, to be honest, in any company, everyone will make a mistake at least a few times, now and then, like it's inevitable. And also like we just learned, like we are also setting up the systems now as a startup. So sometimes even we as co-founders or founders or owners, we don't even know the right way, like we have not been here, like let's you've just build things, like figuring out as it comes and as it goes. So we're like, yeah, let's do it like this, I guess. And then oops, no, of course, like we should have done something else. That also happens, but I think that also setting up this culture of just being open and be like, yeah, like that was probably a mistake, let's see what we can do better, instead of like trying to be like kind of having your ego and be like, oh no, I'm always doing perfect.
Yeah,
That doesn't help anyone. Yeah,
completely agree.
yeah, for sure. Perfect. But thank you so much for that. I would ask you one last question before we go to our Q&A session. Like, do you have any advice for startups who are just now at this point of like building or like in the very early stages and trying to figure out like how do I lead my team? Like, who do I praise? Do I raise? Who do I give a bonus to? Like, how should we handle that?
Yeah, that's a really big and broad and good question, actually. So, I mean, like one thing you can always come back to is like go with your gut. Your gut is always going to lead you in the right direction. I can almost not think of a time when my gut has said, I had a strong gut feeling and then it was the wrong decision. So that's going to be a really, I think that's a really strong thing to trust yourself with.
Mhm.
I don't think you can praise people too much. Like, don't patronize people, but like, if you genuinely think somebody deserves some praise, like, I don't think you can do it too much. Uh, and yeah, like yeah, just trust yourself in it. Find a good online role model, somebody who's done it before that really aligns with your values. Listen to what they say and what they've done.
Hmm.
Yeah, just keep like never stop trying to improve yourself either, and just don't try to be perfect. Like give yourself grace to fail and try to do better tomorrow.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. I think it resonates with most of us because we know that nobody will be perfect anyway, including
No.
ourselves. So why expect it from others? Perfect. Thank you very much, Travis. We have around 4 or 5 minutes left of the session, so I'll just open the floor for some questions or comments. Like, do we have any questions? Does anyone want to add something or just tell us how it is in your company if you already have it set it up? Do you agree with what we said? Like, do you think it's important to actually have some sort of a governance or structure? Let's call it like that. Or is it maybe too early for some of you to already have it? Like, are you thinking about those things? Or is it like, oh, I'm a one-man company, let's say for now, I don't really need to think about like how I'm gonna do stuff. Um, do we have any questions or comments?
Suppose it could be a question about anything as well.
Yeah. I see some comments in the chat we have, for example, what will be the right time to sign the founders agreement?
Ah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of people wait too long on that, in my opinion.
Mm,
It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It doesn't have to, yeah, be anything you spend a lot of money on. But there definitely needs to be a founders agreement of who owns what does it take to become owners of that. Like if you're gonna just like own everything from day one, or if you're gonna put a vesting schedule on it. What do you do if you disagree? What do you do if somebody wants to leave after 1, 2, 3 years? That's really important stuff. It's like a prenup getting married. Like you don't plan on failing, but I mean like what is it? 50% of marriages end in divorce, but like 95% of startups end up failing. So like it's really important to put it in place while things are going well.
yeah, yeah, I completely agree. It's also like easier to figure those out, like when you're calm and when you don't have all the other things happening afterwards, rather than like trying to decide like in a moment of, okay, now everything is so bad and now we still have to figure out like how do we split up or like how do we figure out some very complicated situation as well. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
definitely.
Yeah. Do we have any other comments or question? Uh, Istvan is saying like, isn't it a risk in the eye of later investors if the founders have no uh vesting period or like, or if they don't but own the company from day one? I'm not sure I understand your question correct. So isn't it a risk if the founders have no vesting period but they own the company from day one?
Uh, it can be. It can be. And there's like a kind of like a saying in getting investors, which is like the new money makes the rules. If you need the investors' money coming in,
Money coming in.
they get a strong say on what the terms should be and different things like that. And you don't often see it in like early pre-seed and seed rounds with like business angels and things like that. But when you get into the VC level of investment, sometimes founders who have owned 100% of their shares for 5 years, then you get a VC who's going to invest. Then they'll demand, like one of their demands is often that the founder's shares must now vest again. So that if the founder jumps off in 6 months, that they don't actually get most of their equity out of the company. So it can be I wouldn't say it's like a red flag per se, but it is something that could be challenged or like a demand that like there is some kind of vesting on the founder's equity.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that goes to the question, like because you have also quite a lot of experience with investors and angel investors and different types and so on, both public and private. Can you tell us of a time that maybe we need to restructure or change a bit the policy of our governance or something like this based on what investments we get? Because these are new actors basically that come in our company.
Yeah, for example, when we did our seed round, it was about 2 million euro in our seed round that we raised, and there were some different terms like good lever and bad lever situations for founders. So like if we got like a terminal illness or something, that you're not going to be punished for that. But like if I just wanted to quit, then I would not get all of my equity paid out, for example.
Yeah.
And then we would have something called material decisions, which were there was a couple categories of like if the company was going to spend more than like 50,000 euro at one point in something not related to everyday business, that the shareholders had to vote and 80% had to agree with it to pass. So there was some stuff like that was included.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. Perfect. We have a question from Benny, I think. You can just unmute yourself.
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
perfect.
Super. So thank you for sharing a super interesting discussion. You guys mentioned that it's a quite important thing to select the first 2 or 3 people right from the beginning because it sets out the core values and culture of, what the startup is going to be like. So I was just wondering, what was the key, values and kind of core things that were important for you when you started your company?
Yeah, that's a really good question because you both need people who are skilled and can do the job, but then also people who have sort of that startup mindset in the beginning. So it needs to be people who are comfortable with risk, because compared to like a corporate job, like all of a sudden a startup can go bankrupt and different or go in another direction and things like that. So people have to kind of be a bit more comfortable and a little bit higher risk, be very, very good with change. People who like the same thing each day and kind of like more of a predictable routine tend to not do as well in a startup environment where things are always shifting. And people who believe really strongly in your mission and in your vision of your startup, that they just really want to be a part of it and have that ownership in it, like we talked about before. And you can also reward them with ownership as well. And when you as a part of that founder agreement or a first investor, we've, for example, put like 10% of the company into an employee pool so that when we hire people that we want, we can give them small percentages as a part of their compensation instead of being paid too. But for employees, we always have that on a vesting schedule because that's not just a lottery coupon. It's a payment for a long-term collaboration that they should, of course, get a big piece of or they should get a piece of the pie if we accomplish what we say we're going to accomplish.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Benny?
It does, yeah. I suppose, yes, it's the short-term hiring, but also the long-term wise, like what are you giving to the people who are actually delivering the values and what it would mean to them to, keep them motivated in the long term as well, right? And yeah, super, super good. Thank you.
Thank you. We have last question, I think, in our chat. Olena is asking directly to you, Travis. Would you start now a new business, starting from scratch?
Yeah, I love that question because it's kind of like I feel like you often hear parents who are like, if I knew how hard it was going to be, I never would have done it, but I would never change it for anything in the world. And I think there's a similar aspect to that with entrepreneurship. So the answer is yes. I'm a little crazy. I love entrepreneurship. I love startups. I love being in that dynamic environment. In some way, I love the chaos of it as well. So I would definitely do it again. But the further I get into my career, the more I dream a bit more about being able to invest into startups and kind of let them grind it out and be more on the advisor side with my knowledge and experience, if I'm able to do that as well. But yes, I would. But it is a beast to be a part of.
It's a great question, and if I can just add to your analogy, also sometimes same with children, like mostly the first one it's very hard, and then once you learn how to do it, it becomes easy as well. So, but sometimes you're like, why am I putting myself here as well?
You know what to expect a little more, at least, right?
More or less, yes. But there still every child is quite different. I would say that as well. You never know. You never know. I think we have our last question for tonight. Like, Istvan is saying, what is the typical share of ownership startups offer to the C-level managers who join for a few months later after the founder? So if you have somebody like a CFO or something like this joining a bit after the actual starting of the company.
Yeah, good question. That really depends how soon they start. If you start a company in January and you hire them in May, 5 months later, they're essentially going to be a co-founder at that point. Like they're not really just a first employee per se. They're really starting from the bottom, and when you start a company, it's about the next 5 to 10 years that you're gonna be putting in hard work. It's not so there you might be looking closer to like 10% or more, depending on if you see them as actually like a founder or not. But once you get a couple of years in, and you actually it is more of an employee than a founder because all of the foundation is in place. Just a couple of percent sometimes is enough, but it really depends on the potential of your company. If you have potential to 100 or 10,000x the equity of where you are now, or if it's more like you have the potential to 2 or 3 times what the value is, and then the difference between what you're actually able to pay them on a salary compared to what they can make in the corporate world, and you kind of have to fill in the gap some way. So those are some things to take into consideration.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. But thank you very much, Travis. Thank you also everyone for the great questions and for being with us on this very interesting session tonight. Thanks also to Veronica for organizing this throughout the Boost Up project and making this possible for us as well.